Hello and welcome to this 8th recording in the Azure demo series. So in this particular demo, I'll be covering containers in Azure. Now, container technologies is a very hot topic in IT these days. And in particular, Azure has different options for container implementations. So we have Docker integration with Azure. We have the Azure Container Registry, which we'll talk about when we get to that particular exercise. Um, we'll also cover the implementation of a Kubernetes cluster in Azure. So Kubernetes, for those that are not familiar, is a container orchestrator technology, and Azure has built-in support for this, alongside with other container orchestrator technologies like Docker Swarm and DCOS. Our main focus will be on Kubernetes today, or in this particular recording. So most likely there'll be 3 or 4 separate videos. I'm not sure, it could be more, depends on how long we go. What we want to try to avoid is going too long in a particular video. We want to try to keep the videos as short as possible so it's easier for you to follow along. The instructions that I'll be following today is the instruction from the GitHub page I've been following so far, which covers implementing containers in Azure. There are 2 sections to this. First of all, implementing containers on Azure VMs will be the first part that we'll cover. And you can see it's a really long lab. And then we'll cover implementing Azure Container Services, which is where we talk about ACS Kubernetes cluster. And that's on the instructions in the GitHub URL that we've been following, and that's lab number 7 that you want to ensure that you select. So if I go ahead and select number 7, you see that. Okay, let's move on. So the other thing that I want to show to you is just an overview of what we'll be doing. So first, we'll start by preparing a lab environment, and then we'll complete the first exercise where we'll implement containers on an Azure virtual machine. And then we'll deploy containers to an Azure virtual machine. And then we'll go on to third exercise where we'll deploy a multi-container application. So here we'll be deploying a 2-tier application that has a web application tier running WordPress and database tier running MariaDB. And then finally, we'll cover Azure Container Registry. And some of this I'll try to explain like what we're doing as we go along. Very first thing, ensure that you're logged into the lab virtual machine. In my own case, I've called it MIACL1, whatever you've called it. Ensure that you're logged into your lab machine. So first thing I'll do is I'll bring up PowerShell and we'll go ahead and set up our lab environment for this. So let's run the set of commands that will run to begin. So set the execution policy to unrestricted, import the module that we'll use to prepare the environment, and type how to allow that to run, and then let's add the environment. So ensure that you type 7 here when it says the lab that you want to set up, lab number 7, and ensure that the title says implementing containers in Azure, and go ahead and type Y for yes to proceed. So it's going to begin the setup, ask us to log into our Azure environment. I'll type in the OK your day pass 08. And that will sign us in. Okay, so it's going to try to select a subscription. Obviously, we only have one of the subscriptions, so it's going to end up skipping this part. So let's go ahead and type how to continue. I think the next one will be selecting the location. So let's type how to continue to that. It's going to ask us to select location. In my own case, West Europe is closer to me, so I'll go ahead and type number 3 and press enter. It says your region is West Europe. Then it's going to try to configure the environment. I'll type out to continue, and then the environment preparation is going to start now. So you can see there's a bunch of stuff that it's doing here. So if I go back to the overview document that I brought up earlier, so what's this the script that we're running to prepare the environment, what's it doing? Number one thing that it's going to do is it's going to deploy a virtual machine in Azure. The name will be 20533D0701 VM0. And it's going to ask us to specify the size of the virtual machine. The virtual machine size that we'll select in our case will be D2V3. So I'll explain the reason why that is in a minute. So let's just check that. Okay, it's still on track to deploy this. So the virtual machine size that we're going to deploy, that's going to deploy will be the standard D2V3. And the reason why this is important is because what it's going to do is it's going to deploy this virtual machine and then it's going to install Hyper-V on this virtual machine. In other words, we're going to have an implementation of nested virtualization. Now in Azure, if we're going to do anything that has to do with nested virtualization, we have to have particular machine sizes. So not all machine sizes can implement nested virtualization. In this case, it has to be a V3 machine, which is the latest version that runs on hosts that have Server 2016. So that's the reason why that's needed. And then what the script will do is it's going to create a virtual network that has this address space of 10.0.0.0/22. It's going to create a subnet of 10.0.0/24 under that virtual network. And then it's going to put a machine, the machine that we've talked about now, it's going to put it in that subnet. And then the machine is going to have a public IP address. So as I mentioned here, the preparation script creates an Azure VM of the size that's up there that support nested virtualization with the Hyper-V role pre-installed to that. So let's go ahead. It's asking us for the machine size now. I'll go ahead and type standard D2V3 and press enter, and then it's going to start. So this will take about 22-23 minutes to complete the deployment of this. It's going to be using PowerShell desire state configuration to get all of that ready. So what I'll do is I'll pause the recording now, and once it's completed, I'll resume the recording and then we can proceed. But before I pause the recording, I'll show you a quick diagram of what we're actually doing today. So what it's currently deploying, the script that's preparing the environment, it's trying to deploy this virtual machine. Now it does not have all these other components that I've highlighted, the icons. It does not have that. It's just deploying the virtual machine with Hyper-V installed. Then we're going to proceed to install the Docker Toolbox, which will include Docker machine and Docker Compose and other stuff. So we'll talk about that when we get there. But for now, let's pause the recording. Let's resume when it's completed. See you very soon. Okay, welcome back. So that's completed now, and that took roughly around 15 minutes to complete. So if I go back to the Azure portal, and if I go under resource groups, you see I have a new resource group here. And under that resource group, you see I have a virtual network with the address space that I mentioned at the beginning, and a virtual machine in that network. So majority of the work that we'll be doing in this particular lab won't be doing from our lab machine, the MIACL1 will actually be doing from this machine. So essentially, if I bring up this diagram, what we currently have is we have this empty virtual machine without all these extra components within it. So this is what the script deployed to us. So this machine has Hyper-V role installed in it. So what we need to do is if I go back to the rest of the instructions, let's go to exercise number 1 now, implementing containers on Azure virtual machines. So what we want to do is on this machine where we'll be doing a bunch of the work that we'll be doing today, right? We want to install Docker Toolbox on that machine. So that's the first thing that we'll do. And Docker Toolbox, for those that are not familiar, it's just it's a suite of a lot of applications. So let me bring up a document that will explain a bit more, give you a bit more information. So let's expand this a bit. So you can see that that's going to install Docker CLI client, something called Docker machine is going to be installed. Docker Compose will be installed. So a lot of the logos that I had in the picture are actually just logos for some of these. So Docker machine, this is the logo for Docker machine here, this one, and this is the logo for Docker Compose, and it's going to install a bunch of this on this machine. That's the very first thing that we'll do. So enough talking, let's just go ahead and do that now. Let's bring up the instruction. No, not this one. Let's go for the right one. Let's go. Okay, here we go. So first thing that we need to do is let's log into our virtual machine here. So the virtual machine that we want is this one. So on the resource groups, sorry, on the virtual machines there, I can go ahead and click on this virtual machine that was created by the script, get the public IP address, bring up remote desktop, and log into that machine. Click connect. So the username and password are in the lab manual. So username is student and password is in the manual, which again, I'll put the link in the description below. It's gonna ask us for the certificate. Go ahead and click yes to that, and then that's gonna log me into this machine. And once I'm logged into the machine, I'll follow the rest of the process, which would be the first thing that I would do after logging into the machine is would disable Internet Explorer enhanced security configuration. So we'll disable that so that we will be able to browse the web, because we'll be downloading certain tools from the Docker website and installing that on this machine. So, okay, so this is coming up now. Let's go ahead and click note that. I'll pause the recording and then I'll come back once the machine is fully loaded. I need Server Manager to be fully loaded. Okay, welcome back. So the machine has fully loaded, and as you can see that Hyper-V is already installed on this machine. Actually, I will just add a quick feature. This is not part of the lab manual. This is just me doing this so that I can make a point more clearer later. So if I go on the remote server administration tools and install the role administration tool for Hyper-V management, go ahead and click next and install. You don't need to install this, but I'll need it to make a point later. So that's going to install the Hyper-V management tool so I can show you what will happen. I'll pause the recording here. Once it's finished, I'll resume the recording and then we'll proceed. Okay, so the Hyper-V outside tool is already installed now. So I'll do is I'll just open that up. So as you can see, Hyper-V is installed on this machine, but at the moment it's currently empty. There's no virtual machines on this machine at all. So very first exercise, or very first task in exercise 1 is we're going to install the Docker Toolbox for Windows. We're going to install that on this machine. So we're going to download it from this. Let's go ahead and do that. So to do that, let's go to this URL over here. And by the way, before I go ahead and do that, let's disable Internet Explorer enhanced security. Okay, let's put the link there. Let's expand that. So you can see that's the link for the Docker download for Windows, and I have the stable version here. So I'll go ahead and get Docker for Windows stable version, and I'll go ahead and click save. So that should not take so long. It's roughly around 390 meg, I think. And once it's finished downloading, I'll go ahead and just run it and install it, and then show you what happened, and then we can pause this and move on to the next video. So if I go ahead and click run, you can see that it's doing a bunch of stuff. It's trying to download some packages. So Docker for Windows, installing it on this machine. So essentially this will be a management machine where we do a bunch of the management I'll be doing today. Where we do it from, we'll be doing it from this machine. We're installing Docker for Windows to get certain tools. So we'll get the Docker engine for Windows installed on this machine. We'll get the Docker client installed on the machine. We'll get something called the Docker machine installed on the machine. and some of the other things that I mentioned. So let's go ahead and add um, the add shortcut to the desktop. I'll leave everything else and I'll just go ahead and click OK to that. And then it's going to begin the installation. So I will pause this recording now, and then once it's finished installing, I'll go ahead and start the recording again. Okay, the installation finished. So as you can see, we have to log out and log back in for the installation to be complete. So I'll go ahead and I'll click close and log out, and that will log out of the machine. And then I'll log back into the machine, Spring Up Remote Desktop. This time around, I'll just pin this to the taskbar. So that's the IP there. Let's connect to it. Oh, sorry, putting in the wrong IAM password. Let's get the right password. So what happened when we installed? Because that's essentially that's the first exercise done. So or the first task in the first exercise, installing Docker Toolbox for Windows, which we've just done. But what happened when we did this? Let me show you what happened. Some of the things that happened. If I go bring up the Hyper-V Manager here and go here, so there's no virtual machine found on the server. Let's see. Let's give it a while. Yeah, here you go. So that just takes a while to show up, but you can see that there's this new machine called Mobile Linux VM over here, and the state is currently off. But just give it a while, you're gonna see that it's gonna start, and all that's happening in the background. I'm not clicking anything, I'm not doing anything. But what happened is, as part of this Docker for Windows installation, we have this Linux virtual machine that was installed or deployed using Hyper-V. In the past, this used to have to install VirtualBox and then deploy this part of VirtualBox. But now, just deploy straight using Hyper-V. And by the way, this is also something that is also going away, but just to bring that up. So this is the way that this currently functions. So it deploys this machine. This machine is what's called Docker machine that we'll be using to do a lot of some of the tasks that we'll be doing in this particular exercise. Going back to the diagram, what we just did was we installed Docker um, Docker Toolbox, which includes Docker client and Docker engine on the machine. It also includes the Docker machine that we'll be using for a bunch of tasks very soon. So install Docker machine. It also installed Docker Compose on the machine. So Docker Compose was also installed on this machine, and everything else that comes with the Docker Toolbox for Windows. The other thing that I want to bring out is if I go search and type cmd for the command prompt, you can right click there and click run as administrator, and that should come up very soon. And let's make this a bit bolder for you. Let's go properties, font, let's make that still responding. Oh, there we go. Font, let's make that 24, and let's make that bold, and click OK to that. Okay, so if I do, for example, Docker version, and I can say the Docker version that's installed. If I do Docker dash compose, not sure if that's right. And you can see Docker Compose version. So you can see a bunch of the stuff that it's installed. So it also has Docker machine. So I can do Docker machine dash help, and you can see that that's been installed and set up for. So I'll go ahead and stop this particular recording here because that's gone on for long enough. So we've just done task one of exercise one. So when I continue in the other recordings, we'll do task number two, which will be would use Docker machine to create hosts in Azure. So that's the next thing that we'll do. So thanks very much for staying with us in this video, and I'll see you in the next recording.